All right, so we've got the online folks here. And I've got the screen shared. I think we're doing all right. Okay, so we're still doing our Daniel study, so don't be scared. Okay, don't be scared. But chapter 3 is really suitable for one of those children's Bible stories for adults. And so I rewrapped the study of chapter 3 and added it to my Dropbox under the children's Bible stories for adults. So this just kind of continues the theme. That way, in future years, when I do the children's Bible stories for adults, I'll be sure to include this one as well. And it's the fiery furnace. So this one, I don't know if y'all familiar with the Statler Brothers song. They actually recorded 2 albums. One album was the Old Testament. And so all of the songs on that were stories about the Old Testament. And then they did the New Testament. Well, one of my very favorite songs they did on the Old Testament was a song called They Wouldn't Bend, They Wouldn't Bow, They Wouldn't Burn. And it's a really, really good song. And they actually rap in it, which is kind of cool. It was a rap before rap was cool. Yeah. But it was just a spoken part of the song, and it's spoken in rhythm. Rhythm and poetry is what rap stands for, by the way, if you did not know. So it was that. So we are going to be doing Daniel chapter 3. So here's the children's story. King Nebuchadnezzar ruled the land of Babylon. He brought men back from other lands to work for him. Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were all from Israel, and they loved God. Even though they were far from home, they were close to God, and they obeyed him. God blessed them and gave them important jobs in Babylon. One day, King Nebuchadnezzar decided to build a huge image made of gold. He made a law that everyone should bow down and worship the image, or they would be thrown into the fire. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego knew that they should only worship God. Some of the other king's workers who were jealous that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego told the king they would not worship the image. When King Nebuchadnezzar heard the news, he was very angry. The 3 friends told him that they could only worship God. This made him even more angry, and he ordered them to be thrown into the fire. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were thrown into the fire. When the king looked in, he had a big surprise. There was someone else in there with him that looked like an angel. God protected Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego from the fire. When they left, their clothes didn't even smell of smoke. At that moment, Nebuchadnezzar knew that they worshiped a real God and not some fake statue. Okay, so there's the kid's story. I didn't put my, but wait, there's more in it. I should have done it. Yeah, I should have done it. But Blake wasn't here to appreciate it, so that's okay. That's all right. So we know from our study of chapter 1 and chapter 2 who Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were. They're young men in whom there was no blemish. That's very important because that wasn't just the Babylonians' view of them. This is actually a spiritual view of them. This is the same thing as when it says God saw Noah and considered him righteous. Okay, God attributed to him righteous, which means a right standing with God. And so there is no blemish. They are saying that not only are they good looking and gifted in all wisdom, they're also spiritually right with God. Okay, so that's what it's saying here. They possess knowledge. They're quick to understand. They had the ability to serve in the king's palace, in whom they might teach the language and literature of the Chaldeans. Now, from among these of the sons of Judah were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So what's the significance again of the way that Babylon conquered?
Feed you the information, make you...
Yeah, make you drink the Kool-Aid. Yeah, make you drink the Kool-Aid and then send you back home so that you can tell everybody back home just how great they are.
Brainwashing.
Okay, it's brainwashing. Yep, it is. So remember, we talked about the names before. They started out with names that were Hebrew names, and they were given Babylonian names. Daniel means God is my judge. He was given a new name of Belteshazzar, which is Bel, protect his life. Bel is one of the gods of Babylon. Hananiah was Jehovah is great, gracious, and it becomes Shadrach, which is the command of the moon god. Mishael, who is like God, becomes Meshach, who is like Aku. And Azariah, Jehovah is my helper, becomes Abednego, which is the servant of Nego or Nebu, which is another one of the Babylonian gods.
So was Baal associated with Baal?
Yes.
That was the early.
Yeah. Bel would be the Babylonian name for it. Baal would be the Hebrew name for it. Same God. Yeah. Yeah. It was one of the chief among the satanic princes. So that means it was some head demon that got the name of Baal. Yep, sure enough. So remember in Daniel chapter 2, that was the whole thing about Nebuchadnezzar having the dream. And what was his dream of? It was a statue. And if you remember, that statue is made of many different things. But when we jump here into chapter 3, I think what happened is Nebuchadnezzar was so moved by the dream of the statue, he just said, I'll just build one of my own. Okay, so Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold whose height was 60 cubits and its width was 6 cubits. He set it up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Now, this is modern day what? Iraq. Okay, so this is about 60 miles away from Baghdad. Okay, so this is in the heart of today's Iraq. If you remember from chapter 2, though, the image that Nebuchadnezzar saw that Daniel gave the interpretation of the dream, it wasn't just gold. But what did the gold represent? The gold was Babylon. That was the current government. So it was the head of gold being the emperor Nebuchadnezzar in charge of all the world governments at the time. But then as he came down the statue, it was made of different things. And each of these different things represented what? Another age, another government, somebody taking over from the previous government. So Babylon would fall and it would be taken over by Medo-Persia. That would be the silver torso. Then Persia would eventually fall and be taken over by Greece. That would be the bronze abdomen and thighs. And then we get down to the legs, which are made of iron, and that represents Rome taking over Greece. And then who takes over Rome? Nobody.
Rome.
They fall under their own corruption. And they can't hold together as an empire anymore and split up into city-states and many nations that is today modern Europe. That's it. That's it. And then we've got the stone that hits this statue and busts it all up into little pieces. And of course, we said that that stone was the coming of Christ, who is even going to shake up modern government the way that we have it today and bust it all up.
Are those ages like the Bronze Age, Iron Age, or no?
Yeah, they correspond with that too. The strengthness of each of those metals, what is needed to refine it also is spoken in this order.
Because I know gold is very pliable and iron is not.
Right.
So.
Right. So in Daniel 2, when we have this image from God that was given to Nebuchadnezzar, it had 4 metals, very detailed description, and it talked about the past or the present for them, our past, right? And then their future, which most of it is our past, but there's still one part that has not happened. And what is that? Second coming of Jesus, destroying all of the earthly governments and setting up that theocracy that I was talking about last week. Okay. And so it talks about political power. Well, here in Daniel 3, we know that Nebuchadnezzar definitely was shaken by the dream. Scripture tells us that. But now that he's got an interpretation, he's like, I'm the gold. I'm the best. So I'm going to make a whole statue of me. And so this golden statue represents the power and the strength of Babylon. Okay. All made of gold. There's just a general description of it, and it represents the present of that time. Right. So that is Nebuchadnezzar in charge of Babylon. But instead of it having a political message, which is what the statue in the dream had, this message, he turns it into a religious message. Because of the instructions that we see starting in verse 2, we see that this has nothing to do with politics and everything to do with worship. We see this same thing pop up again in Revelation, which is why I'm even talking about Daniel, so that I can get you ready for Revelation. And the image that we see in Revelation is from Satan, the great imitator. And instead of it being just a statue that's inanimate, now it is animated. It is an animated image. And it has a very detailed description. It talks about the future, and it has both political and religious meanings in it. Okay. So it's all very paralleled, even in Daniel to Revelation. All right. So here's the design of Nebuchadnezzar's image. So it's meaning the king made an image. So this is the image of the king, both ways. Not something that he ordered to be made, but it was him. It was his image, okay? Made of gold. And it said that the height was 60 cubits. Well, a cubit was measured as the distance from the end of your middle finger to your elbow, okay? Of whoever was in charge at the time. So a cubit changed depending on who was in charge. So the king would be measured when he took the throne, and that would be put on a stick and then sent out and said, here's the ruler. That's where that came from. Okay. So that's where that word comes from. No, it's not a pun. That's really it. It's really it. And why is 12 inches called a foot? That was the measurement of the king's foot. So that's what it was. That's really what it was. All right. So a cubit is 18 inches times 60. So it's 90 feet tall. Thank you. 90 feet tall. And its breadth, so its width was 6 cubits. So 6 times the 18 inches, that's 9 feet. So it's 9 feet wide and 90 feet tall. It's a pretty big civil works project here. But the whole purpose was to glorify the king. It was in the plain of Dura. Now, why would he put this statue in a plain?
Everybody can see it.
Everybody could see it from miles around. Okay, it is the highest point in the area. So everybody could see it as they're approaching, head towards that little bump. It's going to be heading towards this statue right here. The archaeologist Julius Oppert states that he found on one of the mounds in the plain of Dura a large square brick. That means it's man-made. 45 feet on a side, 20 feet high, which he believes was the foundation of the image. Okay, so they think they know where this was, and this is in the outskirts of Baghdad. So here we go. Daniel 3, verses 2 and 3. He then summoned the satraps, the prefects, the governors, the advisors, the treasurers, the judges, the magistrates, and all the other provincial officers to come to the dedication of the image that he had set up. So the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the other provincial officials assembled for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up, and they stood before it. So to give you some definitions here, this was a universal invitation. Anybody who was anybody was not invited to come. They were ordered to come. So these were princes, the protectors of the realm, governors, captains, judges, treasurers, counselors, sheriffs, rulers of the provinces, and all the peoples, nations, and languages. So if you're breathing, you're commanded to be there for the unveiling of this statue. Verse 4, then the herald loudly proclaimed, nations and peoples of every language, this is what you are commanded to do. Who's a herald? What does a herald do?
Loud voice.
Okay, the loud voice, the announcer of the king. Okay, usually when a king is coming to an area, a herald goes before the king to toot the horn and say, behold the king, and then list all of his accomplishments. Okay, and everybody goes, ooh, ah, at the first of his name. So this is what you are commanded to do. So he is the voice of the king. As soon as you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music, you must fall down and worship the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace. So now this goes back to that chart. This isn't a political statement statute. This is a religious statement statute. So Nebuchadnezzar at the end of chapter 2, when Daniel gave the interpretation of the dream, Nebuchadnezzar is like, wow, your God is awesome. He is the greatest of all gods. But did he become a believer? No. And he sets himself up as an object of worship himself. So now he is, in his eyes, a god. All because Daniel said, you, O king, are the head of gold. You are in charge, king of kings, little k, king of kings of the entire world. And so he got a big head about it and built a big statue to match his head. All right. So now he's saying that this is an object of worship. So he's got a whole orchestra put together that goes there at an appointed time of day, plays a tune, and if anybody hears that tune with a whole orchestra of horns that's going to carry across the plains, what are they supposed to do? Drop and bow, right? No matter what they're doing, stop, turn towards the statue, and bow down to it. Okay, that's what's going. All right. So when you hear the horn, of course, that's a wind instrument. Flute is actually a pipe. It doesn't have all the keys that a flute does today, but it's like a recorder, but this way. Harp is going to be a harp or a lyre. You've seen that. You hold it in your hand and you strum the strings this way. Sackbut is similar to a trombone. It has a slide so where you can change the pitch of it. Psaltery is similar to a modern day dulcimer. So it's a flat box with a hole with many strings on it. It could either be bowed to make a long sustained sound or hit with felt mallets like a hammered dulcimer. The word dulcimer back then actually meant a kind of bagpipe. Okay. And then all kinds of music. So it's going to be a whole concert out there at an appointed time of the day. And you are to fall down and worship the golden image. At that very same hour, you are to bow down, and if you don't, you're going to be thrown into the fiery furnace. There are still furnaces out here in Iraq that are held over from this age. These furnaces were put together for the purpose of building their army. Okay, this was not a furnace to keep warm. This is a furnace in order to smelt metals together in order to create chariots and swords, spears, and all of that. And
It's not just a pizza.
this is not just a pizza oven. No, this,
Van size opening.
it's big enough for a chariot.
Weird to look at it that way.
Yeah, there's not really scale there, but it's, you can walk in there. It's probably 10 feet high as you're walking in here. It's a big deal. Now, when we think of a furnace, we think more like this.
Yes,
Okay, we think of a blacksmith furnace, right? So this is a type of modern smelting furnace. The purpose of this furnace, I say modern,
Mhm.
right? It's also for the purpose of taking metals and mixing them together to make stronger alloys. And it's used at a normal operating temperature of between 2,500 and 2,700 degrees Fahrenheit. Pretty hot. Okay, so just kind of keep that number in your brain for a minute. 2,500. Okay, 2,500 degrees. So at that time, when all the people heard the sound of the horn, flute, harp, and lyre, and symphony with all kinds of music, all the people, nations, and languages fell down and worshiped the gold image which King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Verse 8, therefore at that time, certain Chaldeans, which is the name that they had for what we called magi in the New Testament, it's astrologers, the wise men, they came forward and they accused the Jews, not the whole nation, just Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They spoke and said to King Nebuchadnezzar, O king, may you live forever. Common greeting, right? You, O king, have made a decree. Remember, you said that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, flute, harp, lyre, and psaltery, and symphony with all kinds of music shall fall down and worship that gold image. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. First question, what should they care? Why are they concerned?
Jealous,
Why are they jealous?
because the captives were placed above them.
Yes, if you remember the story, Daniel provided this interpretation of the dream. And Nebuchadnezzar was so excited that not only did he give the interpretation, but he was to discern what the dream was without Nebuchadnezzar telling him. He's like, wow, you are the wisest of the wise. So you're in charge. So this Jewish captive who's been here 3 years, because that's how long the schooling was, is now in charge of everybody else that was born there.
And he's like,
Raised there.
20?
And he's like 20.
Yeah.
Okay. And his buddies, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they're all the same age. And they all rose to power with him. So these 4 upstarts, they're not even from here, and now they're in charge.
Well, and plus they're like making a mockery of their way of life because they're not eating their food or drinking their wine or having their women or whatever. So
Yeah, they're still living the Jewish way. So they're not doing the Babylonian thing that they're supposed to be. And the other guys are jealous. They forgot the fact that Daniel is the one that kept them alive.
they're mean girls.
Details. Yeah. So Daniel convinced the king, don't put these wise men to death. They weren't led by God Almighty like I am. Right. Right. But there are some Jews whom you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, by the way, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who pay no attention to you, your majesty. They neither serve your gods nor worship the image of gold you have set up. Nebuchadnezzar may have said, don't worry about them, mind your own business. But the way that they worded this now, they've injured his authority. Okay? In public. So now if he doesn't act on this, he loses face in front of the rest of the subjects. So basically, these wise men are pretty wise, and they just painted the king into a corner. He had no choice. Furious with rage. Why? I don't know. It could be because he was tricked into this because he really liked Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, especially Daniel. Or that, well, they're not going to do what I say, so we can't have that. Nebuchadnezzar summoned Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So these men were brought before the king. And Nebuchadnezzar said to them, "Is it true that you don't serve my gods or worship the image of gold I've set up?" That was expected. You've been here all these years. You should have acclimated by now, right? Now, when you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, harp, lyre, pipe, and all kinds of music, if you're ready to fall down and worship the gods I've made, very good. So basically, you may not have done it before, but now everybody's watching. Next time you hear it, just do it, okay? That way we don't have to do anything else. All right. Whoop. But if you do not worship, this is your last chance. You shall be cast immediately into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. And who is the God who deliver you from my hands? Okay. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered. This is one of my favorite scriptures in all of the Bible. And said to the king, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter." Love that. If that is the case, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us from your hand, O king. But if not, let it be known to you, O king, that we do not serve your gods, nor will we worship the gold image which you have set up. This is huge. I can preach entire sermons just on this. But if not, that is one of the strongest phrases in the Old Testament. Are you allowed to bring your petitions before God? Absolutely. Should you doubt that God can answer any of your requests? No. Can we expect God to answer our prayers the way we want them answered? No. That's the big deal. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego know that they can bring their petitions before God. They know that God is more than able to deliver them out of Nebuchadnezzar's hands. So that answers Nebuchadnezzar's question, who is going to deliver you? Our God is going to deliver us. Even if they die, they're still delivered out of Nebuchadnezzar's hands. Okay, so that's a win-win. So yeah, God's going to deliver us. But if he doesn't spare us from the flames, no problem. God is still good. Now, one of my pet peeves is when somebody is sick, maybe sick unto dying, a prayer meeting is called, and people start praying, and they're praying for healing. Great. You're supposed to pray for healing. But then some people get it into their minds that if you have enough faith and pray hard enough, then they will be healed on this earth. Okay? We had some problems here in the church many years ago now. It's about 10 years ago, and this was going on. And the point that I brought up is, can God heal somebody? Yes. Does God heal people? Yes. Does God still heal people miraculously? Yes. Is God going to heal this person just because I asked? No, not necessarily.
If it's his will.
Now, if it's his will, absolutely.
That's
Okay.
That's the
And
phrase I have
it's
heard.
not going to be because he loves that person so much he wants them to hang out on earth. If God does heal somebody miraculously like that, it's for his glory only. It's not to make us happy, and it's not to make that person stay living. Because if God really loves that person that much, then he's going to want that person with him anyway.
I
Okay?
hear people say that, oh, God just needed a left back. He didn't need anything.
You don't need anything.
No,
Okay.
we say all that stuff just to make ourselves feel better.
Yeah.
And so,
So the way that I look at it is that each of us as believers are given tasks that God wants us to accomplish here. Tasks and divine appointments. The problem is we don't know what those tasks are, and we don't know what those appointed times are. I mean, it could be in 2057, I'm supposed to talk to somebody. I don't know, but God does. And God is going to keep me around until I have opportunity to meet those divine appointments. Okay? Using whatever gifts and talents that he gave me. And so that was one of the things that I kept on trying to tell mom. Towards the end, she's like, why doesn't God just take me? I have no purpose here. And I don't know what purpose God had in store for her, but I kept on telling her, no one gives hugs at church like you do. You are needed at church in order to give those hugs. That hug could be the difference between somebody having a terrible day and having a great day. And that may be why God still has you here. Do I know? No, I don't know. But everybody has tasks and appointments that are set for them. So if somebody gets really, really sick and they haven't had the opportunity that God wanted them to have yet, then absolutely God could heal them either miraculously or miraculously through doctors in order to hang around long enough to meet that divine appointment.
Mhm. It's not ready. Right.
Yep. And so the thing here, when people say, why did God take that person? Well, if it's a believer, the best comfort is that they accomplished everything that God had for them to do. Their job was done. And that really is the difference between a temporal mindset, you're only living in these 70, 80, 90 years, or the eternal mindset of this is just a small bump in the road compared to what God has prepared for us. And if you start, and it's really hard when you're young to think of eternity. Why? Because you've only got 16 years of experience. 16? 13 years of experience to fall back on. I remember when Jacob got in trouble, if you put a little kid in the corner for 5 minutes, you have completely devastated them, because 5 minutes to a 3-year-old might as well be, and it's not going to happen. But if it's a 15-year-old, put your nose in the corner for 5 minutes. Okay, 5 minutes is nothing for a 15-year-old. Well, a 40-year-old, 5 minutes? I can try to hold my breath for 5 minutes. Won't be successful, but that's nothing. I mean, now I think 20 years, that's nothing. Time is relative. Okay. So Bugs Bunny has it right. We cannot expect God to answer our prayers. No matter how much faith we have, he's not going to answer them the way we want them answered. He's got the bigger plan. He's got the bigger picture. He's going to answer it the way that, number one, brings him the most glory, and number two, impacts the most people for him. Okay? That's what's important to remember. All right. Then Nebuchadnezzar was full of fury because now they've defied him face to face in public. And the expression on his face changed. So it was, I'm trying to cut you a break here, guys. And now it's like, okay, you've now insulted me. There's no saving face. So he spoke and commanded that the heat in the furnace be turned up 7 times more. Well, they don't have a knob. So how are they going to turn up the heat?
Okay.
It's not enough to put more wood in it. So how do you stoke it? Air.
Have air on it.
All right. If you look at the modern day furnaces that they use for blacksmithing, they've got a bellows and they pump air into it because in order to have fire, you got to have fuel, spark, and air. Okay. You got to have oxygen. So they're now stoking with air as much as they can to turn this fire not just red hot, it's white hot. Now, what temperature did I say that was the normal smelting temperature? 2,500. Now we are 7 times hotter than that. Okay, so we're about 14,000 degrees more. Okay,
It's instant burn.
and it is so hot that it's going to guarantee that whoever goes in it is going to die. But not only that, it is so hot that the men who were ordered to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they were burned up even before they got close to it. So he commanded certain mighty men of valor. Got to get the strong ones, because if God is for these guys, we got to make sure we overpower their God, right? So they were in his army. They were ordered to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And he commanded certain mighty men to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Then these men were bound in their coats, their trousers, their turbans, and all of their garments, and they were cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. They were trying to carry them in there, but the other guys got burned up before they did. So now that's the plan.
Okay, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Where's Daniel?
Daniel's not here at this story.
Like, how come this guy's so freaked out, not Daniel?
The original accusation was only against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Now, we do see Daniel take a prominent story next week.
Yeah, I know, but I just didn't know what was the big one.
Yeah.
So we don't really know why.
Yeah. So it could have been. Therefore, because the king's command was urgent and the fire exceedingly hot, the flame of the fire killed those men who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Now, they should have known at this point something's amiss, because all of my people are now dying, and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are like, we're waiting, right? So at that point, they know. Yeah, they know. All right. So they all are thrown into the fiery furnace, right? And they're in the midst, they're in the middle of the fiery furnace. And King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished. He rose in haste and he spoke, saying to his counselors, "Did we not cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire?" So maybe Daniel showed up. I don't know. And they answered and said to the king, "True, O king, look, I see 4 men loose," so they're not bound, "and they're walking in the midst of the fire, and they're not hurt. And the form of the 4th is like a son of the gods." Some of your translations may say, looks like the son of God. That's not accurate. Okay? An angel isn't accurate either. So they're talking about, in their reference, a demigod. Okay? Who's a demigod? What is a demigod? Okay, so an example of a Greek demigod would be Hercules. Okay? He's a man, but his father was Zeus, and so he has extraordinary human strength. Still human, but extraordinary human strength. So the reference that they're making here is that this 4th is like a son of the gods. But like I said, some of your translations, I don't remember if it's NIV or it's one of them I came across when I was putting this together. It says, looks like the son of God. And that's not correct.
Servants of the Most High God.
And what's that?
This is NIV.
Okay. All right. So Most High God, is that Jehovah God or is that one of their gods?
Well, it says servants of the Most High God.
Right. But who are they calling the Most High God? That's the question. So yeah, we don't know it. And we just don't know. We don't have enough. Yeah, we don't have enough information there. But I do need to talk about a Christophany. So by definition, a Christophany is a appearance or a non-physical manifestation of Christ. before he's born in the manger. Most often we speak of an appearance of Jesus in the Old Testament as being a Christophany. So it's still possible this could have been a Christophany. We just don't know for sure. So that's why in this reference of Daniel, I'll put a little asterisk right here, Daniel 3:25. Put a little asterisk there. It's questionable. We don't know for sure. I've got some with the plus signs on it, though, that in scripture it says the angel of the Lord. Whenever you see the angel of the Lord, that's a Christophany. That's Jesus showing up in physical form on earth before he's born as a baby. Now, why does it have to be Jesus? Why can't it be God himself? Bonus. Scripture tells us that no one can see God and live. Okay. So we know that Moses was able to see the afterglow of God as he passed by. And that made him shine for months, just seeing God's backside as he walked by. So he just can't survive seeing the face of God. So we see a lot of different scriptures. I've got them there for you to look at, while you're about to fall asleep on your Sunday afternoon nap. There is.
Yeah.
There is. So verse 27 says, and the satraps, prefects, governors, royal advisors crowded around them. They saw that the fire had not harmed their bodies, nor was a hair on their heads singed. Their robes were not scorched, and there was no smell of fire on them.
I think that's the miracle. Is there's no smell of
Didn't even you go to a barbecue place and you smell of burnt wood for the rest of the day. Not when it's white hot. Yeah. Then Nebuchadnezzar said, praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants. That may be a little clue that it wasn't Jesus. We don't know. They trusted in him and defied the king's command and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their own God. Therefore, I decree that the people of any nation or language who say anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be cut into pieces, split stream, cut into pieces, and their houses be turned into piles of rubble. For no other God can save in this way. He is extreme. Okay. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. Okay. And they're now in charge. All right. So that's it for today.
Wow.
Any questions? Have y'all all heard this story before? Is this new for anybody?
It's just amazing that, this fire, however, if there's a boring fire, he gets close to the door and tells them to come out. Just the other guys that got close were burned up, so it was his, how far away was he yelling at them to come out? He's just like, hey guys, come out now.
Yeah.
Or God allowed him to get close, so he could do that, so.
Or gave them super hearing to hear over the roar of
That's
that
true.
fire.
Can you
because-
imagine how loud it is?
Yeah, that
Because
roar.
we were eating at, Shogun Friday night, and he just put the little fire in front of us. I'm like, dude, that's super loud. And I was just a little bit tired.
Yeah. So this image that now has popped up in chapter 2 and in chapter 3 of Daniel, it's going to pop up again in Daniel.
You mean the statue?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so there's a recurring theme. And then it pops up again in Revelation. You have to be able to take the Bible as a whole, okay? You can't even think of it as just a collection of books. Because there's information that applies to Revelation that you have to pull from other books. It's meant to be taken together. So if all you have is like some churches, they only do New Testament, you're missing out. You're not going to get the full understanding. If you don't understand the history, the social structure of Jews, then you're going to be missing out on such richness of the New Testament. It's not only that the Old Testament points to Jesus, the Old Testament gives us all of the fullness that Jesus is fulfilling. When Jesus says, I haven't come to do away with the law, he's telling us right there, you have to give as much thought to the Old Testament as you do the New Testament, because it all fits together. Okay?
It all points to each other.
It does.
So,
It's very reflexive. The Old Testament points to the New, and the New Testament points back to the Old. It does. Okay, any questions? So we're going to be jumping into Daniel 4. So yeah, we're going to be continuing. Yeah, Daniel comes back. So what did I miss?
Let me tell you,
Yeah.
Barbecue.
I was gonna say that. Barbecue.
What Bible do you recommend?
Depends on what you're going to be using it for. If it's just for your own personal study, NIV, the NIV Study Bible, it's the clearest to understand in adult language.
See, and I like
have them on
NLT
sale in
better.
the coffee bar.
I'm sorry?
They're on sale in the coffee bar.
Oh, okay.
Little plug, sorry.
I have no idea. For my personal Bible studies, I use the New American Standard because it gives a more proper English representation of the original language. So it doesn't come off the tongue smoothly, but it's really good for understanding, right? For speaking at a wedding or a funeral, King James. Just because the way it sounds official.
Tradition.
Yeah, you know. So it depends what I'm going to be doing with it. But just for regular study, I use the NIV.
Just reading the ESV makes it really easy to read also.
If I'm trying to read something to a kid, I'll use the Message.
Sometimes it gets kind of
It
convoluted.
gets
though.
Yeah,
weird.
it's-
The Message gets weird. The Living Bible, that's nuts. I mean, who came up with this, right?
I think they were high in the 70s.
Jesse likes to use the NLT. I don't find anything wrong with the NLT. It doesn't fit my brain.
Which is fine, because my brain's different than his, and I like it better.
Yeah.
But yeah, his, no.
Yeah, we tried reading the one that you had mentioned,
Tree of life.
the Tree of Life Bible. It's one of the newer Bibles. It is a Messianic Jewish Bible. And
Oh, yeah.
very interesting because where in the NIV, it'll say Lord, capital Lord. In the Tree of Life Bible, it'll say Adonai.
Adonai.
And instead of the Most High God, it'll say Yah
Mhm.
for Yahweh. So, I mean, it's just like, it's kind of weird. What?
If you're Jewish, it makes sense.
It does.
If you're not, then they're like, I don't understand.
Yeah,
Mhm.
don't have the Jewish context.
I'm constantly turning back to the glossary to, you know, I can't even pronounce
Right.
children of God. It's just, that doesn't fit together in my tongue. It just
Yeah.
doesn't work.
Right.
So sometimes I have to pull up the
So
pronunciation.
when I was going to seminary, one of my first purchases was a parallel Bible. And you can find parallel Bibles in all sorts of different versions. The one that I had was King James because my professors were King James only. King James, NIV, and then it had Greek on the other side.
And I thought I had Hebrew.
Well, Old Testament was Hebrew.
Great.
So the New Testament was Greek. And so I was able to cross-reference just on a page open. And
That was a
then
huge Bible.
it was big Bible, and small print.
Yeah.
So Clint Lowry is King James only. And so he would preach King James. And so I would have going down King James, following what he's saying. If it was something that I needed greater understanding, I'd go over here to the NIV. And then I'd catch the study notes, which are at the bottom, and so I've got all of my references right there, right, references. And so you can order parallel Bibles in whatever translations that you want. But now we don't need to, because we've got our app. And so if you're reading in NLT and you're like, wait a minute, that doesn't match, then you can pick ESV. Nope. NIV. Oh, there it is. And now you match.
All the ones you pick.
Yeah.
Can give you the.
Yeah, and they're all right there. You just switch back and forth between them very easily. You can highlight a verse in NIV and then you can go and hit Greek and it'll bring up Greek and it's highlighted. And you can try to figure out the words based on Greek. So there's all sorts of different ways that you can do that.
There's 74 English versions.
So, if you don't mind, would you, since you're talking about this, what is a Hebrew or Greek lexicon?
It's like a dictionary, encyclopedia, it's a word translator. Dictionary. So it'll give you the English to.
Is there an app for that rather than buying those huge books?
I imagine there is.
No,
But see, now I always use Strong's. I always use Strong's to get at a concordance, to get from English to the Greek or to the Hebrew meaning.
But
And that's all.
currently, I do have one, but I have to, have a magnifying
Yeah.
glass to read it.
Yeah, there's an online
Because
version too, though, that you can use, and that way you can get all your definitions that way. Okay. All right, very good. Anything else? So from last week's sermon, why is it that naked is the only thing that I keep on getting comments about?
Because you said
Because
naked.
we're children,
Naked.
we are human children.
N-U-K-K-I-D.
N-U-K-K-I-D.
And if you're from Alabama.
Actually, you started off that
Well, I have a friend.
Thank you.
who hears that, he says, naked or naked.
It's like shopping or shopping. You know what, I was on, not the Golden